Hello and welcome back to SPINcast. My name is Sheridan, and today I am joined by quite a lot of people here today, and we're bringing you another episode of Jobs in Esports, where we're going to be talking about just one of the many esports jobs, and today we're covering casting, or shoutcasting, or whatever you want to call it. And joining us today, you know him as one of the SPINcast hosts, joining us from the Carolina Esports Hub, Bear Light, who is an esports commentator, as seen on the PAX Arena desk for Valorant, as well as RLCS team broadcasts across North America, and APAC for professional, and NECC for collegiate Rocket League. Additionally, we are joined by Nick Vodible, a host and caster. He has 6 years of casting experience under his belt, with over 100 collegiate Rocket League events casted. He also casts for Shopify Rebellion and recently has stepped into the Omega Strikers scene, casting the Battle for Texas live at DreamHack Dallas. So, now that we got all the introductions out of the way, let's kick it off with Vodible. Let's talk about how you initially got into esports and into casting as a whole.
So we go on forever, but
my start was in high school where I was making content pretending to be a commentator for Call of Duty. That's where it started for me. I was casting my public matches, and I was either a podcaster because in Black Ops 2, that's where the podcaster mode came out. And to date myself a little bit, I think it was back in 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. So I know some people they don't really know much about the scene back then, but a lot of YouTubers got really big off of just making reaction content there, or doing whatever they could. And that's a big inspiration to me. But after high school, graduated, didn't really do much with that. But fast forward to when Rocket League came out, 2015, played that, looked at the scene for a little bit, had some fun, and eventually decided to stream on a new PC I got in 2017 and cast some bot matches under a different name called Vodcaster because it wasn't for Call of Duty. So that's where I started out with that, cast a bot match, and eventually the community organization that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but used to be big back in the day, was Nexus Gaming. Harry and Jorby, who is now one of the RLCS casters, contacted me randomly when I streamed that one day, now about 6 years ago, in May, and said, hey, we like your casting, you should come on and cast a 2v2 match for us. And then the rest is history from there. So eventually I started doing some more LAN events. My first one was DreamHack Atlanta 2017. Again, Jorby wasn't able to make it for the BYOC that happened right next to the major that was going on at the time, where the Muffin Men won that. It was a great time to see that. That was my first LAN event, and then did a bunch more after that. Eventually was able to host the Rival Series B stream, be the first host for the CRL B stream, host my first studio production 2019, which was the Renegade Cup. It was huge. And then just doing a bunch of alternate broadcast stuff for mostly RLCS stuff for a while, and eventually being one of the main hosts for the CRLB stream now this year, and doing a bunch of org streams for Shopify Rebellion, Susquehanna Sonics while they were still in NA, Ghost Gaming, XSET, a couple of different orgs of that sort. And I've found some other games I've casted here and there, but eventually just kind of grew to a point where I could do this full time for the past 2 years now.
You've had a huge casting journey. I think that's incredibly cool. And then Bearlight, we have heard this story, but for the audience as well, Bearlight, if you want to go over how you got into casting, and then we'll go into, kind of the more question stuff. So.
But I started in the entertainment business as a frontman for a band, terrible pop punk band back in the day. And so I was always an entertainer at heart. Went to school twice, haven't done much with that. It's typically the major story, and it's my story as well. But so toured the United States, did all of that. It's not as luxurious as they make it seem, right? So let it settle down a little bit, kind of backtrack. And I love playing video games. My artist ways made me so that I was basically running server job to server job. And, it was just, when COVID hit, it didn't seem like I wanted to go back afterwards. My heart definitely not there, right? So I started streaming during that time frame, and when I did, what I noticed was a lot of my personality that I carried on stage also transferred with me when I was on screen. So I started hosting Rocket League tournaments. Again, this was well after the fact that Rocket League had started, right, or had bumped up in 2016, I think, when RL Esports really started taking up. So I started casting on my own stream, right, on my personal stream. That's where I got a lot of my experience, was just some of the friends that came through too. It didn't have to be
big names in the industry, professionals at the time. It was just, let's get whoever's on here, throw up a tournament, one of the in-game tournaments that Rocket League had that always broke back in the day, but before they're good now and fixed. But regardless, but it was a lot of fun, right? I met a lot of cool people, got to network there as well. And it turns out that, that entertainment kind of transitioned over. So I was able to cast for the next few years for World of Rockets, a couple of other places that I've been, include, trying to think of some of the other organizations I was with, went through a lot of the weekly tournaments and casted there and got even more experience. And then community came through for the Charlotte Phoenix, and so they picked me up to do some of their RLCS The Grit back in the day, to cast some of those opportunities. So that was tons of fun, getting to know the organization, and turns out they kind of liked me, I guess. I don't know why, but they decided to pull me on for their casts for RLCS for Charlotte Phoenix, and my goodness, the organization behind that, they've been carrying me ever since. I got to, like I mentioned, cast both PAX Arena West and PAX East as well at PAX Arena, so got some Valorant action in there as well, and so Rocket League and Valorant is what I've been casting ever since.
Absolutely. And you said both of you have such strong broadcast voices. I don't know if that's the right terminology for it. I think that's so cool. You guys sound like official casters. How did each of you learn that this was something that you kind of had a knack for? How did you get from your first cast, maybe not sure what you're getting into, to now you're these polished casters who are casting LAN events, casting team streams, anything like that?
I'll go first on this one, Bear. Basically, when I was talking about in high school with podcasting and Call of Duty and all that, the two people that I really looked up to and tried to emulate with the voice that I was going for at the time was Puckett and Fwiz. Those were the two play-by-play casters that were that's what I tried to emulate a little bit. Some people, they pull from sports, they pull from different broadcast mediums, even if it's just radio, but that's what I focused in on. Then eventually, as I started to do more of the stuff, you kind of feel more into your own voice. You don't go too much towards one specific source. It's better to just rely on your natural voice and use that as your broadcast voice for the most part. Just you're enunciating a bit more. It's coming from your diaphragm a bit more and kind of know cadence a bit more as well. And eventually that just comes with time and practice to get to that point. But in my opinion, some people are born with a voice that's really good for broadcast, but not everyone is. It's just emulating people you think are already what you want to do, and then eventually working that into your own natural voice that you have as well for developing your broadcast.
And I could take that one step farther as well, or kind of build off what you're saying, that not everybody is born with it. I don't think I was by any means. When I first started seeing you back in the day, it wasn't there. It took, hours and hours and hours of vocal warm-ups, right, of vocal technique work with the coaches in order to get to where I was comfortable singing on stage for multiple years. And so I don't think I was born with it necessarily based on if you were to hear recordings as a kid or even just growing up, and with my voice developing in that way. And also getting influence, right? So one of my favorite sports is hockey. So Carolina Hurricanes used to have John Forsland as their lead play-by-play. So I took a lot of influence from that very early, and people started to catch on and say, hey, the pacing's right? Everything's starting to feel good in a way. And then at that point in time, I was able to transition and kind of bring a voice of my own to it. And even got pointed out on the major RLCS broadcast when they pulled me on as being as a lot of people in chat, oh, the punk broadcaster's back. And I was like, wait. What does that mean? Right? But yeah, that's my own personal voice from back in the day shining through, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a lot of big names coming out that I know Vodible mentioned Fwiz and Puckett. I'm an FPS guy, so those names are household. Those are the names you go to. People are still wanting Fwiz to commentate COD Champ, so awesome to see that you're getting mentorship or even just kind of a, influence from them. For those that may not know, you kind of hit on it earlier, Bear, with the play-by-play or color commentary. What is casting and what are some roles that imply in that? Could you maybe describe it a little bit to people who are kind of newer to the scene?
Yeah, definitely. So with it comes a few different roles, right? Commentary in general, you can split it up how you want to, but basically you have a host desk, which is a host, maybe you have a few desk analysts as well that talk prior to the games beginning, between games, and at the tail end of the broadcast itself, and they'll sum up a majority of what the event is, right? What you can expect, some of the storylines that are building as well, which we'll catch into, which kind of crosses over into the casters. So I'll switch over there. Casting is over the game itself and also can be in between individual games within a series or a match, depending on what esport it is. And so with casters, you have a traditional way of having a duo cast with play-by-play, which is simply describing the plays that are happening as they're going on. For example, player A passes it to player B, player B shoots and scores, right? And then color commentary is their combination, if you will. They're there to fill in some of the gaps in between the gameplay if it slows down, or if there's not a lot developing currently, or even if it's building up a little bit but not quite, high action, high octane action. They can fill in with some of the storylines, some of the zoomed out, bigger picture items that are happening in the game, strategies, things of that nature. And then games like Rocket League, where it happens so fast, you kind of switch back and forth. You adopt more of a hybrid where both get involved in a lot of, you can actually fill in the gaps of me of where I might have missed something there to you.
Yeah, that pretty much explains everything, depending on the esport or sport or whatever it is you're commentating for. There's more defined role with the play-by-play in color, like you were saying with Rocket League, more of a hybrid style, which the Mega Striker stuff I've been doing. They're still trying to find exactly what style they want for the casters that are out there, and that's something cool about new esports styles. It's like there's that room to grow, that room to figure out exactly what you want and what the audience appreciates the most, commentary style-wise, and usually it comes down to personal preference for the most part. But as you're saying, the analysts, after say a big goal happens or pentakill happens in League of Legends, then usually they're the ones saying this is how it happened and how it got to that point, and this is why it got to that point and why it matters. Whereas the play-by-play is describing it as it's developing, as you were saying, and going to that point and the big payoff of the full call for the most part, but sometimes interchangeable depending on what's happening.
And I want to touch on, you talked a lot about preparation and, you're not only are you as a caster explaining what's happening in the game on the screen, you also have to do this preparation, do this homework to learn about the players and the teams, and you're weaving these stories together. So you're basically like a storyteller. So how do you as a caster tell the stories of these players and these teams? How do you explain the importance to the audience and showing them why it all matters?
Say for CRL again, because I thought you going back to this team, Northwood, have they ever lost? Are they going to go down? And if they do go down, what does that mean for their legacy or their future events that are happening, and different speculation that you can have for it too, and just making it more than just two different teams face off against each other and talking about that. You want to say why that matchup really matters and making it so that viewers understand that too. It's are they just competing for fun? Is this an invitational? Is this a show match? Is this for the world championship? And there's different stakes to that, and sometimes it's good to be super hype about all that stuff, but sometimes this person, they've won every single one. Then you want to focus more on the other teams. That's are these teams finally going to put up a challenge and talk to you about those CRL championship spoilers? You won that. That's a big story. That's what people were talking about, because finally it wasn't just NA, and NA, looking at RLCS for Boston, they're not looking good, so they're the underdogs, so this time even more so than they've ever been. That's another part of the story that could be when really it just comes down to putting things pen to paper if you need to, or just trying to think of how things come together with all the rankings and results and the stats and everything else, and putting that into a presentation like we were talking about, doing your homework, doing your presentation on the day before the broadcasting, telling that story with your co-commentators, with everyone else that's making it a possibility.
There are some moments that are going to be big, and you want to make sure that your tone reflects that, right? So you get even more excited in those moments. And the way that I do that is you don't just summon up, unauthentic energy to match that vibe. What I do personally is I'll look at it from my perspective, right? I put myself in their shoes. If I were matching up against a teammate that kicked me off the team not too long ago, I'm summoning that energy. I'm saying, hey, this guy, he doesn't want me here, but guess what? I can get to the top. And so that's where I find my inspiration, how I get some of my energy as well, is by feeling what they would feel in that moment. And that really helps me get to that next level that'll really allow you to match that energy.
A lot of good points all around. I know personally, when it comes to just kind of, even on these podcasts, Bear and Sheridan are going to know, I'll get to the end of the sentence and I'll forget where I was, what I'm talking about, completely lose train of thought. I'm just talking. What are some of the challenges that come with casting? How do you overcome them? Maybe some like buzzwords at the beginning, like I answer sentences with yeah, definitely all the time. How do you kind of get rid of that stuff?
Taking a mental note of it, writing it down, putting a sticky note up so that when you say that, you can try and think of something else to go with. I've heard from Stacks, which was a great piece of advice he gave me at one point, was that he has a list of synonyms for crutch words that he has on sticky notes on his monitors sometimes. And even some casters like, I think it was Pole, went with an entire synonym list for every most common used phrase in Rocket League that has up if he has issues with that people use, and go through those different words each time just to keep it fresh. And so it's not exact same wording and phrasing for everything too. Reading a book also helps a lot. If you read a lot more books, that helps expand your vocabulary. I need to do that a bit more personally. That's what I've heard recommended to try and make a bit better. But not being too hard on yourself too, because everyone makes mistakes. Everyone kind of forgets where they're going from. I mean, I personally have ADHD, and that's going to get you to deal with things. So writing things down, do all the prep work, having stuff that I can reference helps me out a lot personally, so that I can go back and reference on those, so that I know, okay, if I don't know exactly what to say at this point, I can look back at it. If it's an ad read or something, I'm not going to be able to memorize that firstly, so I have it always on like a monitor right here that I can read off of it and look back at the camera at certain times so that I can get that right and nail it every single time.
Going back and watching yourself casting back in the day, if you're not cringing, I'm looking back, I'm like, oh my goodness. And this is just like maybe 1 or 2 reels back. I'm like, oh, that's what I wanted to put out there for everybody to see. Listen, but I think it's important that you see those little things. I still have phrases all the time. Like at the end, I'll keep on recycling as well at the end of my statement. It's like I still haven't kicked that to this day. But what I do, in those little instances in between is I'll also just use the word and, I'll be listening to what it is that my co-caster is saying, and you're trying to just build off of that, right? Instead of just having to agree and then go into what you're saying, just remember to just maybe drop it all together and just go with what you were saying to begin with. If you don't need to acknowledge it per se, that's one of the ways to combat that at least.
Another thing I would bring up with this too is that sometimes you do lose your train of thought while you're casting and you're going through different situations. It's okay to just drop your whole heart entirely and go on to another topic that's happening to you. To drop it instead of stumbling and fumbling with what you're talking about. I've had that happen a couple of times in the past, and never is the greatest experience there. But the bot review, as you were mentioning, is so crucial to make sure that you know exactly what those crutch words are. It's okay to try and say the ums and ahs, but not as often. The biggest hold I see from most people is they try to talk way too fast, like an auctioneer sometimes. So they're like, FPS, as we were talking about before. I think we'll love to talk super fast, and that's not the way to word. The best way to do it, in my opinion, to try and make sure that you're talking as well as you can, is to slow things down. If you feel like you're going to fumble, if you feel like you don't know what you're going to say, well, you need to slow down so that you can catch up and actually say what you're trying to communicate to everyone that's out there. As you probably, if you listen back to what I was just saying, taking certain breaks in what you're saying so that you don't stumble over yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, oh my God, I just said my crutch word, which is absolutely. That's how I start every response. Absolutely. I think casters are the biggest improvers I've ever met. Like, I thought of this while Bear was talking, like, yes, and like, that is y'all, like, to a T. Like, y'all are the biggest improvers I've ever met. So I have a question. What would you say is in your caster starter pack? This could be equipment. This could be a tip that you want everyone to know, vocal technique, anything like that. What is your Vodible and Bear Light caster starter pack?
Everyone wants to go for the best equipment that's out there, but as long as you have a mic that doesn't peak, the biggest thing, you don't want to peak when you have high moments. So sometimes you need a mixer of some sort that to work. I know some people have used the Scarlett. Sometimes it doesn't work for most people. Some people use voice meter. There's different things you can use for it. I recommend looking up answers for compression. That helps a lot too, so that you're not peaking in those high moments. Because if you're peaking throughout your foot, when you're trying to use that for real, it usually doesn't sound good when you're trying to march yourself. So that's definitely one thing. Having a good microphone is principal, but you don't need to have some microphones out there. There's some that are pretty solid for less than $200. Don't have time to recite all of them because I can't really remember them firstly. but also a decent camera, but really you can just have a webcam and good lighting. Good lighting helps more than the best cameras that are out there, because that way you look a lot better and it helps with lighting up the scene, but also having a background that doesn't have too many brands behind it is a bit easier. So say you have all like the NBA style posters, or you have anything else in that sort. A lot of companies don't like having that, so either having a green screen as an option is always good, or just blurred background. As you can see with me, there's some stuff back there that people would recognize, but right now, it's not as big of a deal. So that's always something that's good to do too for that. And you definitely need a decent internet connection. If you don't have a good internet connection of any sort, then casting is going to be very tough unless you can do it from like an esports cafe or from your faculty that you have at your college. So it's really tough to do it without a good internet connection.
I think to go even more basic on the audio side is to have an XLR mic specifically. So you can look into basically any of those. That should help to some degree. It's not going to fix all peaky microphones, but I've learned that even with the AT2020 that I use, everybody's like, where did you get this pristine, incredible sounding microphone? I'm like, it's $100 on Amazon. So that makes it a lot easier too. And I say, go look up voice exercises, even if it's for C, because if you go through those, which I do prior to every cast, it'll stop your voice from breaking, right? If you're doing it correctly. It'll also allow you to hit higher notes, right? When things start getting crazy, which is super nice. And then on top of that, you don't wear out as easily. I can't tell you how many times I've been casting for like 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. And luckily my voice is still there because I was able to, warm it up prior and then warm down after. But that's everything that you can look up, in vocal warm-ups.
Yeah, so throwing it back to, I'm going to mention Call of Duty this time. But, you have those insane duos, the Maven and the Mercs, the Chance and Miles now are taking over the scene. So those duos have kind of carried together for the scene a little bit and bounced from game to game. We mentioned Puckett earlier, started in Halo, went to Call of Duty, and I think Mr. X went to Overwatch for a little bit. That's who I was thinking of. How important is networking with those people and branching off into different games, or just building those relationships to add more opportunities in the future? And what are some tips that coincide with that?
So I have a personal anecdote about this too, and a kind of a regret of mine as well, is when I was first getting started, I was too focused on doing LAN events and not really focusing on casting and producing content and networking as much as I should have. I'm originally very much an introvert and not really as suited as most people would be typically for an on-camera or on-camera job, but you eventually have to get outside of that comfort zone and get comfortable with being uncomfortable with that stuff. So you need to be able to network. You need to be able to make these connections. And sometimes you miss out on opportunities because you didn't know that you had that opportunity available. They're not going to wait for you to contact them. You need to be the one to make that first introduction, make that first step forward. Because if you don't, for me, I personally missed out on a high level of casting for Rocket League a couple of years ago. And again, missed that shot, but there's still other opportunities, other doorways, other chances, and making sure that you keep those good connections, don't burn bridges, make a good impression every time, and just be a good person is a good way to start that. But you have to always get out of your comfort zone to just be cold calling and emailing people, not to like annoying them, but to the point where you're like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I have to offer, and having more things to offer from other esports titles always helps.
As far as networking goes, I think you hit it on the head. I'd kind of like to talk about what you're doing over there, Vodible, which is, I know you set up a Discord server called VOD's Green Room, which is an excellent place for not only just commentary, right? It's also for producers, just anybody in a production team to find opportunities. So I think that's really an awesome opportunity as well to join in servers like that. So I've always looked for communities who are doing it as well. And yours is a prime example of just that. Finding those opportunities you can through those Discord servers. So I found that very useful, and being able to connect with individuals there. Also, when you're starting up in the scene, don't be afraid to take opportunities. I mean, you don't want to work for free, no, but when you're getting, if you're brand new in casting, that's definitely a route that you can take to get more experience, just like I did with my personal stream. But when it comes to networking, social media is huge. Brayden, I know this will play directly into what you've been saying on multiple of these SPINcasts. which is having that presence, right? Making sure you're up to date and, connecting with as many people there as possible too, because they're on there as well, sharing their experiences and some of the things that they're accomplishing. Also, you can share yours. And then suddenly you'll realize that a lot of people, you have things in common. You can start having those conversations. I think social media makes those cold calls per se, or, first initial contacts with individuals a little bit easier if you have something to work with.
Yeah, so you're gonna have those vouches from people you've met throughout the scene, and you grow and continue to, expand your audience, right? Another thing about esports that I truly love is that because it's online, we're finding new ways to kind of prove your worth and show who you are. So like in person, you have business cards, and you can hand someone a resume. How important is it to have a portfolio? Or I know Vod, you were touching on it earlier, having little clips and snips of something you did, maybe a big event you casted. How important is that, and how do you kind of go about creating and proving your worth to other employers?
You need a reel to be updated every 3 to 6 months maximum, I would say, with new clips, some of your biggest events, some of your biggest calls. And if it's something from, like, say I've been doing this for 6 years now, something from my first few years, people aren't going to care about that because it was an event so long ago. They only care about what's more recent, because there's a bit of a recency bias in esports, and that's why you want to keep letting them know, like, hey, I'm still here, I'm still doing this thing. Here's some examples of my work. And the way to go about that is, say you have a cool call that you do, or a great play that happens, or a good segment that you have during a broadcast. Write that down and put it aside for later. If you're running it yourself, like I've been running some Omega Strikers tournaments, you can mark it on your own stream and be like, I'm going to go back and clip this and make something out of that. I actually need to, after this that I was going to today, clip some Omega Strikers stuff to make an Omega Strikers reel. Sometimes it's good to have individual game reels. It's good to have a host reel. It's good to have a general reel with multiple games. It all depends on who the client is that you're trying to appeal to, and just getting the word out there that, hey, this is what I can do, because they don't know unless you let them know that this is what your skill set is, this is what you can do, and you got to continue to market yourself constantly as a commentator.
One of the things that one of the mistakes I had starting up as a caster as well was waiting too long to start pulling those clips. And
then they're gone.
Exactly. They're gone. Absolutely. You go back and you're like, oh, that great event that happened. Except the production team and their Twitch only keeps those VODs for like a week or a couple days, right? And then you realize, poof, you don't have it anymore. So that's why it's important to be really proactive with it. Write it down is a great idea, which is something that I need to do. And go back to it and create that reel so that way it's updated. And that's entertainment business in general. Just like in the music business back in the day, and this is how I learned that lesson a little bit prior to coming into esports, was nobody cares about your album years and years ago, except for the people that listen to it, right?
Exactly.
But employers, right? If you're looking for a new label, they're not going to care what you did back then. What have you done for me now, right? Or what can you do for me now? So it's always a good idea, just like if you're looking for any other job, right? It's how can I better your production, right? What are you looking for? Are you looking for somebody who can hit ad reads? Because that's a strength of mine, right? Perfect. Like, let's talk about that. Let's chat about that. Always play to your strengths, I think goes without saying, but sometimes people don't really do that as often as maybe they should.
How do you avoid becoming a one trick in one game without spreading yourself too thin?
Oh gosh.
Because I know you're spreading into Omega Strikers, and Bear, you had commented on Valorant, and I know Rocket League is y'all's main thing right now, but do you have interest into spreading into other games, or how do you advise someone to learn about other games while still maintaining that main role, right?
So that's still something I'm sure Bear and I can both relate, that we're still trying to do. I feel like most commentators who have a main game are still trying to figure out what the other games are, because games like Rocket League, they aren't as easy to take what you know, take the casting, take all the cadence and everything from that, and take it into other games as well. Because say for all the FPS titles, there's different guns, there's different maps, but you kind of know the flow at that point once you've been casting FPS titles for a while. That's why you see people who've casted CSGO go to Valorant, go to Overwatch, go to whatever else FPS title is out there, because those skills are transferable. So I usually recommend for people who are trying to get into more games is to focus on those titles, because they are more transferable and easier to get into there. When you start in a game like Rocket League, that's more its own unique thing. It's very difficult to branch out if you aren't as familiar with the scenes or with the cadence or with the timing and the different structure of each of those broadcasts. So it's hard to know exactly where to go for that. And eventually you just have to just jump into the abyss and do it. That's what I've tried to do with Omega Strikers. I've tried to do it with other games in the past, but you have to find games that you like for the first thing, because that helps a lot with branching out into other games. So like League of Legends, I tried for a little bit. It's not my thing. Very tough to get into because there's over, 160 champions you have to memorize and know their abilities, and know the different items that are out there and the different paces of it. And you can get like a basic understanding of it, but if you want to get really involved in a new scene, you got to get really involved in a new scene. You got to play the game a lot. You got to analyze footage from the professional scene, and you have to put all the effort you can, because otherwise you're not going to be seeming very genuine to those scenes. They will call you out on it.
Yes, and then you need somebody as like an advisor to you for the title that you want to dive into, because I never really looked into Roller Champions until suddenly they were throwing me on the desk because I wanted to try it out, right? And so I actually had a bunch of friends that streamed that title, in Roller Champions just coming out, a couple of years ago, and we're trying to grow their scenes. And one of the ways I was able to get to the top of that title was just by simply learning it from the ones who play it on a regular basis, and then jump in and play myself, right? And get absolutely wrecked by the individual that I'm learning from, but that's beside the point. And having fun in there, right? If you have no passion behind a new title, if you don't care about a new title,
It's not gonna work.
It's not, right? Exactly. Even if it's the new exciting title that's brand new, which is typically what you want to look for if you're trying to become the top level caster of a certain title, is get in early is a big tip. And that still applies. But if you're not passionate about that brand new title, then it's probably not going to work out very well. Just kind of as a tidbit there. But overall, I think I've spread myself a little bit too thin from time to time. I've tried to learn League of Legends, like you mentioned, with everything else you mentioned, and runes on top of that, right? And then just multiple titles through Stay Plugged In, because we offer so many showcases for so many titles that you can participate in. And so I've been trying to learn multiple titles, and what I've realized is I don't have to, right? I don't have to jump into all these titles. I can let somebody who's very passionate about it and create an opportunity for somebody else who might want to step in and work it as well. So it's always good to keep your head up, know what you're passionate about, and only cast those opportunities that you really do truly care about.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked about networking. It's important to network and put yourself out there. Let's talk about advocating for yourself. So,
Oh, man.
as
So hard.
All the tough ones, yeah. Lots.
how do you advocate for yourself as a caster, and why is it important?
So that's something I definitely need to get better at. I have actively been told that I am too nice and I need to advocate for myself better because I'm missing out on jobs that I should be getting for it. So that's something I need to learn a little bit more. And the best way to do that is not be super full of yourself, of course, because that comes off very easily, but kind of humble brag a lot about what you're doing. So say you have a bunch of broadcasts that are coming up this week. If you don't tweet about them, nobody's going to see that you're doing that stuff. Nobody's going to know that you're putting these productions on. Say like, hey, I got some cool thing coming up soon this summer. I can't say it until like the NDA passes, but it's like I need to make a post about that, or even make a video so that people know like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and see what other orgs are out there and be like, hey, I did this thing. I did great. They thought I was great. See if there's like a reference for that too, so someone can help you with advocating for yourself as well. So like say you have a connection that works for Stay Plugged In. So let's use that as an example. I could be like, Sheridan, hey, I'd love to work with these folks. Can you get me an introduction there so that we can get something going? And then it just flows from there so that you have those connections, you use that, advocate for yourself, but still are able to showcase what you are doing to the world that's out there. And again, having a reel helps the most with it too, because if you don't have an example for your work to show people, it's very hard to advocate for yourself just based on like a text or words or anything of that sort.
Yeah, definitely don't want to be timid reaching out for opportunities no matter what, right? It might seem above your head. You'd be surprised what you can land. And sometimes, I know I struggle with the same thing, Vodible, where will label me as too nice in these regards. It's like I don't really reach out like that. I've been lucky enough to call an organization home where I get plenty of opportunities to keep my stuff fresh. But if I'm looking at other opportunities, right, or looking at opportunities around the scene in different titles, let's say, it definitely helps to reach out no matter what. And I already brought it up, but I'll bring it back up again because it is very important. But speak about your strengths, right? And if they ask for your weaknesses, that's fine. Be authentic about it. But you definitely want to focus on what you can do to improve their broadcast as it stands right now, right? What does their production look like? What do they need a little bit more of? Do you have something of that they're looking for that you can also bring to their broadcast? So that's what I look for first and foremost, I like to speak to my strengths, and if they ask about weaknesses, being very, transparent in that regards as well. This is a tough one for me as well, because like I said, I'm just like Vod in this stance, but that's pretty much what I got on that topic.
So we've kind of talked about advice that you'd give players or casters that are coming up into the scene and the casting scene that are wanting to, build their brand. What's something that you have as a goal for your brand or your personal content that you're trying to, achieve in 2024, 2023?
Main thing is trying to define my specific brand even more so than just being like a passionate, positive commentator from Canada, lives in the US, been doing this for like this many years, into someone who's trying to run events, grow a community, and elevate the playing field for a lot of talent that's out there that are trying to do productions with the green room stuff I've been doing. But also, numbers really actually matter to a certain point in this industry. Once you reach the levels where, okay, you're getting the same kind of gigs, you're not really going anywhere from that. I've been there since like 2019 for the most part for what I've been doing. So main thing for me is getting the partnerships with YouTube partner and Twitch partner. Just got YouTube partner thanks to the Omega Striker stuff I've been doing, and
Nice.
helped from branching out into other stuff. And I'm getting the numbers for Twitch partner with the events that I'm putting on too. And once I get that, eventually, that'll help be something that I can market myself, be like, hey, I've got this community, I've got this audience, I've got all these specific bullet points, like this is why you should bring me on for production, not just because of the commentary, because eventually you're at the same level as most people, apart from like the most famous people that have been doing it for years. And it's not the numbers of years you've been doing it or the how good your cast sounds, it's more what you can bring audience-wise to their production. And that's something I've realized more recently that I've been trying to do a little bit better. So getting to a certain marker on Twitter for that helps. I still need to figure that out. But yeah, YouTube, Twitch help a lot. TikTok even too, to some casters. I mean, I always recommend people trying to get in now to start with content first and then eventually work in your own casting for it too. Because if you have that brand, if you have that marketability, it just elevates yourself for being able to be hired for these productions.
Oh, definitely, because they can utilize you for their own marketing as well.
Yep.
In addition to that, oh my goodness, Vodible is going to be on the cast here tonight, and you realize you can bring in more people for them as well. That helps them out. So that's just another thing you can add to your list as far as what are my strengths, right? How can I help this production team?
So that's definitely huge. So I love that as a goal for basically anybody, including yourself. Seeing that you need to grow there too is super cool. And I'm doing the same thing because my following not quite as big as I'd like. I'd constantly like to kind of grow and have that same effect. If somebody were to mention that I was on the broadcast, to have that, I guess, validation of being good. I'm not sure if that's the exact word, but
Making sure that people understand that.
The recognition.
Exactly. We'll go with recognition. It's a lot easier anyways. Yes. And
I almost also going to take something that you said earlier in the broadcast too, which was, trying to learn FPS was a little bit more difficult for me. I played Counter-Strike back when I was like 12, 13 years old, back in 1.5. I just aged myself as well. So a very long time ago. So I understood the basis of it, but I didn't really understand it. And so I have a little bit of foundation to build on, but my goal is to definitely learn FPS a little bit, be a little bit stronger. So I've been joining leagues, playing Valorant leagues where I'm just absolutely the worst player in the league, but it's fine. I'm learning, right? And that'll bring me a lot more opportunities. I can start to learn and expand in more titles. I know X Defiance coming out. I'd like to, try my hand at that. Right? Give it a shot. Yeah, new title. Jump in while you can, and hopefully be a little bit stronger when I do. So that way I make a bit bigger and better impression. And then, also with multiple brand new titles, that'll help your numbers naturally too. So it kind of all plays together in a way.
That's definitely great advice, and of course, wish you both luck on your future goals. Moving into our final question of the day, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had when you first started your casting journey or esports journey as a whole?
The main thing for me, and I talked about it earlier with kind of the regrets that I had before, was focusing too much on going to like live events and doing as many events as I could instead of VOD review, making sure that I was improving my commentary, making sure I was improving my game knowledge, making sure that I was making content and making an impact in the community. Because you have to be visible to be audible. That's what I'm going to continue to repeat, because if you aren't visible in the communities, nobody's going to know that you're there doing this work and going to be able to hire you for these jobs. And if you aren't visible by approaching people and reaching out and saying, hey, I'm here, this is what I've done, have this reel, they won't know to just reach out to you. It's very rare. It's super rare to get lucky and have like someone watch you do something like I did. I randomly streamed and someone contacted me and it's like, hey, we liked your casting and you should come do that. But that's also because I clicked the go live button and somebody watched it in the Rocket League category because they saw casting bots on my title. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't be here today. So you have to literally be visible to be audible. That's my piece of advice.
I think it's being flexible for opportunities and understanding that the way that you envision yourself in esports might not exactly be the way that it plays out in the future. You could go for one opportunity thinking that it's going to look one way, but esports is completely malleable. It'll change before your very eyes, right? There are so many avenues that can open up in front of you. There are so many that'll shut down before you can even realize that it was there to begin with, right? So you have to be open and flexible, or my two things, and take opportunities. I took a collegiate esports show called The Charge back in the day with Stay Plugged In, which was part of the Carolina Esports Hub. And that allowed me to cast for a professional team, the Charlotte Phoenix, and then be pulled onto the RLCS broadcast. Like, how does that happen, right? So be open to opportunities that may not even present itself as something huge to begin with. But if you get your foot in the door in the right place, you can definitely land in a spot that you want to be, even if it doesn't look exactly the way that you pictured in the first place.
That is fantastic advice from both of you. And then, of course, I'm going to give you a moment to make yourselves visible. Where can we find you? Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, anything like that?
Yeah, for me, it's at VODIBLE. It's Audible, but VOD is how you spell it for Vodible on every platform that's out there. If there's one that I'm not on, let me know so I can get on that platform. I've been making Omega Strikers VOD content for all the matches that we've been producing on twitch.tv/Vodible on my YouTube channel. I recently got over 1,000 subscribers. We've had like 100,000 views for that. It's insane to me how that's been going. So if you like Omega Strikers, definitely check that out. It'll be branching out into more stuff too. Running weekly tournaments with it. I actually have one tomorrow, depending on when this is posted. Twin Drive Thursday for EU. So if you want to see how those competitions go, if you want to cast some Omega Strikers and you like the game, hit me up. You can just tweet at me at Vodible. That's where you can find most of my social stuff there too. And again, I've been casting for Shot by Rebellion whenever the new season comes around. Hopefully we'll be back there so you can watch team streams there. And wherever else content is, I'll be trying to make it.
For me, it's Bearlight Casts. Basically anywhere. So that's Bearlight and then Casts, CASTS. And you can find me on all the social media, like Vod mentioned. If there is one I'm not on, let me know. But Linktree is on all the social media too. So if you go to one of them, you will find all of them, which is very convenient. I've been running a lot of the Stay Plugged In events. Like we have the showcases coming up, or even just recently past with Rocket League and Overwatch 2. I was able to cast those. So constantly on the broadcast at twitch.tv/StayPluggedIn as well. You can check me out there. Charlotte Phoenix had a big presence in Rocket League. Whether or not that's going to be the case in the future, we'll see. And if it is, I will definitely be on those casts and other opportunities around the RLCS scene. You can catch me on day one, whether it be there or in other places too. But that's basically sums me up as well.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. That's all we have for you today at SPINcast.